Have you ever realized betrayal doesn't arrive with a scream, but with perfect silence? That morning, I opened my eyes to endless water with no paddles, no keys, and no other boats, just me and my fiancé drifting. Then I found the note trapped under a rock. Two words reading like a death sentence. You chose this. My family didn't just leave us behind. They left us to disappear. My name is Harper Thomas. I need you to remember that name because for a long time, the people who were supposed to love me tried very hard to turn it into a ghost story. They wanted me to be a tragedy, a cautionary tale whispered at dinner parties about the woman who wasn't careful enough, smart enough, or stable enough to survive the wild. But I am not a ghost. I am the woman who woke up and decided that dying was too convenient for them. The first thing I registered was the heat. It was not the gentle warmth of a morning sun. It was a physical weight, pressing down on my eyelids with the heavy, suffocating pressure of a thumb. The air smelled of stagnant water and heated aluminum. I tried to move, but my body felt like it had been constructed out of lead and bad decisions. My mouth tasted like copper and dust. I pushed myself up. The movement sent a wave of nausea rolling through my stomach, sharp and acidic. I blinked, trying to clear the grit from my eyes. The world came into focus in blinding, high-definition terror. I was not in the cabin. I was not in a bed. I was sitting on the metal floor of a small aluminum fishing boat, drifting in the dead center of Juniper Ridge Reservoir. The silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It wasn't peaceful. Nature is rarely silent. Usually, there is the lap of water against the hull, the cry of a hawk, the rustle of wind in the pines. But this silence was total. The water was a sheet of dark glass, stretching out in every direction, completely flat, mirroring the cloudless, indifferent blue sky above. We were a blemish on a perfect mirror. "Marcus," I croaked. My voice sounded broken, like dry leaves crunching underfoot. Marcus Lane was slumped against the starboard side, his head lolling at an angle that made my neck ache just looking at it. He was my fiancé, the man who had taught me that love didn't have to hurt. And seeing him like this sent a spike of adrenaline through my chest that finally woke me up completely. His skin was flushed a dangerous shade of red, the sunburn already blistering on the tops of his ears. He wasn't drugged. I knew that instinctually. My family didn't deal in drugs. That was too messy, too traceable. They dealt in neglect and plausible deniability. Marcus was just exhausted, dehydrated, and likely in the early stages of heat stroke. I crawled over to him, the metal ribs of the boat floor digging into my knees. I shook his shoulder. "Marcus, wake up," he groaned, his eyelids fluttering. "Water," he whispered. "Harper." "I'm here," I said, though I wasn't sure where here was. I looked around. We were miles from the shoreline. The trees on the banks of Cedar Hollow looked like toy models, green smudge marks against the brown earth. I stood up, gripping the gunwale to steady myself. The boat rocked gently, the only movement in the entire world. I looked toward the stern. The outboard motor was tilted up. I reached for the ignition. Empty. My heart hammered against my ribs. A trapped bird. I checked the transom. The fuel line wasn't just disconnected. The connector had been unscrewed. I checked the oar locks. Empty. There were no paddles. I scrambled to the bow. There should have been an anchor. There should have been a rope. The metal cleat where the bow line had been tied was bare. It hadn't been cut. If it had been cut, there would be frayed fibers, a sign of panic or haste. But the cleat was smooth. The knot had been untied. Someone had stood on the dock, or on another boat, and methodically, patiently worked the rope free, loop by reverse loop, ensuring we would drift away without a sound. This was professional. This was clean. "Where are the keys?" Marcus asked. His voice was stronger now, laced with the beginning of a panic I couldn't afford to let him feel. He was pulling himself up to a sitting position, shielding his eyes from the glare. "They're gone, Marcus," I said. My voice was frighteningly calm. It was my work voice. I work in compliance auditing. My job is to look at a disaster and find the paper trail that led to it. I don't scream at the fire. I look for the arsonist's matchbook. Gone. What do you mean, gone? Did they fall in? No, I said. They didn't fall. I scanned the boat. It was a 12-foot aluminum shell. Nowhere to hide anything. My backpack was shoved under the front bench seat. I grabbed it, my fingers fumbling with the zipper. I dumped the contents onto the hot metal floor. My wallet was there. My phone was gone. Of course it was. Signal or not. A phone is a record. A phone is a flashlight. A phone is hope. But there was something else. A clear plastic gallon Ziploc bag that I hadn't packed. I picked it up. Inside were 2 16-ounce bottles of generic spring water, 1 protein bar chocolate peanut butter, the kind that melts into a sludge in the heat, and a small packet of gauze and antiseptic cream. I stared at the bag. The cruelty of it took my breath away. If they had left us with nothing, it would have been murder, pure and simple. But this 2 bottles of water, this was a calculation. This was a chance. This was plausible deniability manifest in plastic. If we died, they could say we had supplies but mismanaged them. If we died, it was because we weren't smart enough to ration. "What is that?" Marcus asked, staring at the water bottles like they were gold bullion. "A test," I said. Then I saw the rock. It was a smooth, gray river stone, about the size of a fist, resting on the rear bench seat. It looked out of place, too intentional. Underneath it, fluttering slightly in the breathless air, was a piece of white printer paper. I picked it up. 2 words, printed in standard 12-point font. Centered on the page, "You chose this." No signature, no date, just the accusation. I felt a scream building in my throat. A primal, jagged thing that wanted to tear its way out and shatter the silence of the lake. I chose this. I chose to be stranded in the middle of a reservoir in Idaho. I chose to be dehydrated and burned. I looked at Marcus. He was staring at the shoreline, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. "We have to swim," he said. "Harper, we have to swim. I can see the trees. It's not that far." "No," I snapped. He looked at me, startled. "We can't stay here. We'll bake to death. Sit down, Marcus. We need to go." He started to stand up, the boat rocking violently. I grabbed his arm, digging my fingers into his sunburned skin hard enough to make him wince. "Sit down." He collapsed back onto the bench, his eyes wide. "Why?" "Look at the water," I said. "Distances on water are deceptive. That shore is at least 3 miles away, maybe 4. The water temperature in this reservoir is barely 60 degrees because it's fed by snowmelt. You are already dehydrated. You will cramp up before you make the first mile. If you hit the water in this state, panic will kill you before you drown. So we just wait to die." "We don't panic," I said. "Panic is death before dying. We are not going to die." I turned my back to him and looked at the lock on the storage compartment again. I forced my brain to switch modes. I was not a victim. I was an auditor. I was collecting data. I leaned in close to the ignition switch. There were scratches on the metal faceplate. Bright, silver scratches. Fresh ones. Someone had tried a different key first. Or maybe used a screwdriver to force the tumblers before realizing they had the right key all along. No. The scratches were around the edges. Someone had been clumsy. Someone had been nervous. I smelled the air near the motor, beneath the scent of gasoline and lake water. There was something else, a sharp, sweet chemical smell. WD-40. Someone had lubricated the clamps recently so they wouldn't squeak when they were being manipulated. I looked at the floorboard. There was a smear of mud near the stern, reddish clay. The soil at our rental cabin was dark loam. This red clay came from the north side of the lake, near the marina where the locals docked. "Harper," Marcus whispered. "Who did this?" I folded the note, carefully, along its original creases. I put it in my pocket. "You know who?" He shook his head, denial written all over his face. "They wouldn't—" "Not this. They're difficult, Harper, but they aren't murderers." They aren't murderers yet, I said. They're betting on the elements doing the work for them. I looked at the 2 bottles of water. 32 ounces for 2 adults in 90-degree heat. Drink a capful, I told him. Just a capful. Wet your tongue. I sat down on the floor of the boat, minimizing my profile against the sun. I closed my eyes for a second, not to sleep, but to record. I was recording the feeling of the heat, the helplessness, the specific vibration of betrayal. I didn't know it then, sitting in that aluminum coffin, but while I was rationing drops of water, my family was already executing the next phase of their plan. Exactly 9 hours later, in the air-conditioned living room of the rental house that smelled of pine sol and deception, my sister Violet would pick up the phone. She wouldn't dial 911. She wouldn't call the sheriff's department to report us missing. She would call a lawyer. I learned later that her voice didn't tremble. She was calm, pragmatic. She asked about liability. She asked about the timeline for declaring someone absent. And then, she asked the question that revealed the true rot at the center of my bloodline. She didn't ask, "Will they survive?" She asked, "What happens if she comes back?" That was their fear, not my death, but my return. They were terrified that the ghost wouldn't stay buried. I opened my eyes and looked at the camera, or, I suppose, I'm looking at you now. The person reading this, the person listening to this, my family thought they left me in a blind spot. They thought that because there were no cameras on the lake, there would be no witnesses. But they forgot that a story is a witness. They forgot that the truth, once spoken, is harder to kill than a person. If you are seeing this, if you can hear my voice, I need you to do something for me. I need you to comment hi below. Tell me where you are watching from. Los Angeles, New York. London, I need to know you're real. I need to know that there are eyes on this story. Because they are going to come for me. They realize the water didn't work. So now they are going to use the law. They have money. They have lawyers. And they have the terrifying confidence of people who have never faced consequences. They are going to try to say I'm crazy. They are going to say I staged this. They are going to try to bury me under paperwork and court orders. But I have something they don't. I have the memory of that sun. I have the memory of the scratches on the lock. And I have you. Stay with me. The water was just the beginning. The real storm is coming. To understand why I got on that boat, you have to understand the person I was 3 days ago. Rewind 72 hours. I was not a survivor clinging to a cooler in the middle of a reservoir. I was Harper Thomas, 38 years old, a senior compliance auditor for Redwood Meridian Compliance in Fort Gray, Colorado. My life was a grid of perfectly aligned spreadsheets and color-coded calendars. I lived in a town where the mountains cast long shadows by 4 in the afternoon, and I liked it that way. Shadows are predictable. You know exactly where they are going to fall. I spent my days looking for cracks in other people's foundations. Companies hired my firm to come in, look at their books, their safety protocols, and their hiring practices, and tell them where they were bleeding. I was good at it because I knew what a lie looked like when it was flattened out on paper. I knew that if a number was too round, it was probably fake. I knew that if a safety log was filled out in the same color ink for 6 months straight. Nobody had actually checked the equipment. I had built this life out of necessity. 5 years ago, I walked out of a marriage that had slowly, systematically dismantled my sense of reality. My ex-husband was a man who could make me apologize for his infidelity. When I finally left, I was hollow. I had to rebuild myself brick by brick. I went to therapy twice a week. I took up running. I started saving money with aggressive discipline. I created a world where nothing could surprise me. And then there was Marcus. Marcus Lane was the anti-drama. He was a landscape architect who smelled like cedar mulch and rain. He didn't play mind games. If he was angry, he said he was angry. If he was happy, he smiled. He was solid. He was the ground floor of a building that wasn't going to collapse. Naturally, my family hated him. They didn't hate him because he was rude or unkind. They hated him because he was immune to them. My mother, Elaine, would try one of her passive-aggressive barbs about his career. Something like asking if he enjoyed playing in the dirt for a living. And Marcus wouldn't get defensive. He would just laugh and say that yes, he actually loved it. He didn't feed the beast. In a family that functioned on emotional currency and manipulation. Marcus was a foreign economy. He made them look ridiculous just by standing there and being normal. The trouble started with a letter that looked like junk mail. My great-aunt Jean had passed away 6 months prior. Jean was the black sheep of the family, mostly because she refused to dye her hair and moved to a trailer on 40 acres of scrubland in northern Idaho in the late 90s. When she died, she left the land to me, not to my mother, her sister, but to me. My mother said it was a final insult, leaving me a pile of rocks and dried sagebrush that would cost more in property taxes than it was worth. I put the deed in a drawer and forgot about it. It was just dirt in the middle of nowhere. Then, 3 days ago, on a Tuesday morning, I got an email on my work server. It was from a land broker I had never heard of. A man named Davis. The subject line was urgent. He offered me $450,000 for the property. I remember staring at the screen, my coffee cup hovering halfway to my mouth. $450,000 for rocks, for sagebrush. I replied immediately, asking for clarification. His response came back within 10 minutes. He said he represented a client interested in conservation. I am an auditor. I know that when someone offers you $500,000 for nothing, it is never about conservation. It is about what lies underneath. I started digging. I pulled up the county records. I looked at the geological surveys. That same afternoon, my sister Violet called. Violet is 2 years older than me and has spent her entire life curating an image of effortless perfection. She lives in a house where the pillows are karate chopped in the middle and the children are never seen with dirty faces. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask about work. She asked about the land. I heard you got an offer. She said. Her voice was light, breezy, the vocal equivalent of a mimosa. I didn't ask how she knew. In my family, privacy is a concept they don't believe in. I told her yes. It was strange. You know, she said, pausing for effect. Shane and I were talking. Mom and Dad are getting older. We need to think about the estate. If you sell that land directly, the capital gains tax is going to kill you. Plus, it complicates the inheritance lines if anything happens to you. I waited. I knew the pitch was coming. You should sign the deed over to the family trust, she said. We can manage the sale from there. It protects you. It keeps things simple. We can bundle it with Dad's assets and minimize the tax hit. You would still get your share. Obviously, we just want to make sure you aren't taken advantage of. There it was, the family trust, the black hole where my parents' control exerted its strongest gravitational pull. I told her I would think about it. 2 hours later, my mother called. Harper, she said, her voice dropping into that concerned register that usually preceded a critique of my hair or my weight. Violet tells me you sound stressed. I am not stressed. Mom, I am working. You sound exhausted, she insisted. You have been working so hard since the divorce. You never really took time to heal. Honey, you just threw yourself into that job. I breathed in through my nose, counting to 4. This was their narrative. Harper is fragile. Harper is damaged. Harper needs to be managed. Dad and I were thinking, she continued. We rented that beautiful place up at Juniper Ridge for the long weekend. Why don't you and Marcus come up? Just for a few days. Clear your head. We can talk about everything in person. No pressure. Just family. I wanted to say no. Every instinct in my body, every alarm bell I had installed during my recovery, was ringing, but I also wanted to know why. Why were they swarming now? Why was $450,000 enough to make them play happy family? I told her I would check my schedule. That evening, I drove over to my parents' house to drop off a box of Aunt Jean's old photos I had found. I had a key. I had never given it back because, despite everything, I still held on to the pathetic hope that one day we would be normal. The house was empty. They were out at dinner with Violet and Shane. I walked into the kitchen. My father's iPad was sitting on the granite island, plugged into a charger. The screen was dark. I don't know why I touched it. Maybe it was the auditor in me. Maybe I just wanted to see if they were emailing the broker behind my back. I pressed the home button. It wasn't locked. The browser was open. There were 3 tabs. The first tab was the Zillow listing for a massive commercial property in downtown Denver that my father had been obsessed with for years. He was a developer who had leveraged himself to the hilt, always robbing Peter to pay Paul, always one deal away from ruin or glory. The second tab was an email thread with Violet. The subject line was simply, "The transfer," but it was the third tab that made the blood drain from my face. It was a search query. Competency evaluation for adults, Colorado. Guardianship process for mental instability. Financial power of attorney involuntary. I stood there in the silent kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. They weren't just trying to get the land, they were trying to get me. They were building a case, the concern about my stress, the comments about my fragility since the divorce, Violet telling people I was struggling. It was a campaign. They wanted to prove I was unfit to manage my own finances so they could take control of the asset. The land wasn't just land. I realized then that my father was likely in deep trouble. He needed that money. He needed the mineral rights, and he couldn't afford for me to say no. I heard a car door slam outside. They were home. I put the iPad down exactly as I found it. I slipped out the back door and walked through the garden to my car parked down the block. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands shaking on the wheel. I should have driven to the police station. I should have driven to a lawyer. I should have taken Marcus and driven to Mexico. But I didn't. I called Marcus. "We are going to the lake." I told him. He was surprised. He asked if I was sure. I told him yes. I lied to him. I told him I wanted to make peace. The truth was, I needed to see how far they would go. I needed to look them in the eye and see if I could spot the moment they decided to betray me. I needed to know the specific terms of the deal they were making with the devil. I thought I was walking into a negotiation. I thought I was walking into a confrontation where I could pull out the printouts of their search history and shame them into silence. I thought we were playing a game of chess. I didn't know they had already decided to flip the board over. So, I packed my bag. I packed my sunscreen. I packed the clothes I would wear to my own execution, and I drove us north, toward the water, telling myself that I was the one in control. That was the last time I was Harper Thomas, the auditor. The next time I opened my eyes, I would just be prey. The rental house sat at the end of a long gravel driveway, a modern structure of glass and timber that looked less like a home and more like a brochure for a lifestyle no one actually lives. It was perched on a ridge overlooking the water, aggressive in its beauty. When we pulled up, the first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't the natural silence of the woods. It was the manufactured silence of money. The landscaping was too manicured. The windows were too clean. It felt like a stage set where the props had been glued down to prevent theft. Violet was waiting on the porch before I even turned off the ignition. She wore a cream-colored cashmere cardigan that probably cost more than my first car, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail so tight it pulled the corners of her eyes upward. She looked like she had been cast to play the role of the welcoming sister in a pharmaceutical commercial. She came down the steps with her arms open. "Harper," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of lavender laundry detergent and expensive white wine. "You made it. We were worried you would get lost." I did not hug her back. I let her arms drape over me for a second, then stepped away. "The GPS works fine." "Violet," I said. Shane, her husband, appeared in the doorway behind her. Shane was a man who took up space aggressively. He was broad-shouldered, with the kind of thick, muscular neck that suggested he spent a lot of time lifting heavy things and putting them back down. He didn't smile. He watched us get out of the car with the detached scrutiny of a bouncer checking IDs. "Good time on the drive?" Shane asked. His voice was flat, devoid of inflection. It always sounded like he was reading from a transcript, or perhaps creating one. "Fine," I said. "Hello?" "Shane," Marcus said, extending a hand. Shane looked at the hand for a fraction of a second too long before shaking it. "Firm grip," he said. We walked inside. The interior was vast and open, smelling of lemon polish and unlived-in space. My parents were in the kitchen. My mother, Elaine, was chopping vegetables with a frantic energy that made me nervous. My father, Gordon, was pouring a drink. He looked older than the last time I had seen him. His skin had a grayish cast, and his eyes darted toward me and then away, unable to hold contact. "Harper," my mother said, wiping her hands on a towel. "Oh, look at you. You look tired. Doesn't she look tired?" "Gordon, she looks fine." "Elaine," my father grunted into his glass. "No, she looks thin," my mother insisted, coming around the island to touch my face. Her fingers were cold. "You are working too hard. I told you, didn't I? Living alone in that apartment, nobody to cook for you, it wears a person down." I stepped back out of her reach. "I eat fine, Mom, and I like living alone." My mother exchanged a look with Violet. It was a quick, fleeting glance, but I caught it. It was the look of two people confirming a diagnosis. "You are always so defensive," Violet said softly, leaning against the counter. "We just worry about you. You have become so isolated lately. It makes you paranoid." "I am not paranoid," I said, keeping my voice even. "I am observant. There is a difference." Shane walked past us, carrying our bags toward the guest wing. "You can take the room at the end of the hall," he said over his shoulder. "It has the best lock." The joke landed in the room with a thud. Nobody laughed. Dinner was a performance art piece in tension. We sat around a long farmhouse table made of reclaimed wood. The lighting was dimmed, the candles were lit, and the food was technically perfect roasted chicken, asparagus, potatoes, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. Marcus sat next to me, his knee pressing against mine under the table. It was the only thing grounding me to reality. For the first 20 minutes, the conversation was meaningless filler. My father talked about the weather patterns in the valley. Shane talked about the maintenance schedule of his SUV. Violet talked about a charity auction she was chairing. They were filling the air to keep the truth from rushing in. Then, the plates were cleared. My father poured more wine, filling his glass to the brim. He didn't offer any to Marcus. So, my father started, clearing his throat. "Violet tells me you have been looking into the property Jean left you." "Here we go." I said, "I received an offer." My mother made a sharp intake of breath. "An offer from who?" "A broker." I said, "It is a significant amount." "How significant?" Shane asked. He wasn't eating. He was leaning back in his chair, watching me. "Almost $500,000. I said. The table went silent. My father took a long drink. "That is a lot of money to manage," Violet said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, especially for someone who is not used to complex financial structures. "I manage audits for Fortune 500 companies." "Violet," I said, "I think I can handle a bank transfer." "It is not just about the transfer," my father said, his voice rising slightly. "It is about the long term, taxes, liability. If you sell that land to a stranger, the money is just income. It gets taxed. It disappears. We have a structure." "Harper," Violet said. She reached into her bag, which she had kept by her feet, and pulled out a sleek leather folder. She placed it on the table. It slid across the wood with a soft hiss. "What is that?" I asked, though I knew exactly what it was. "It is the paperwork for the family trust," she said. "Mom and Dad and I have already moved our assets into it. It protects everything. If you sign the deed over to the trust, we can sell the land as a single entity. The tax burden is minimized. The money stays in the family. Stays in the family." I repeated, "Which means I don't control it. You would be a beneficiary," my mother said quickly. "Of course you would. We just want to make sure you are safe. Safe from what I asked. From yourself," Shane said. I turned to look at him. "Excuse me? You have been unstable." "Harper," Shane said. He said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. "Since the divorce, you have been seeing a therapist. You are medicated for anxiety. You make impulsive decisions. I felt Marcus stiffen beside me. I put a hand on his arm to stop him from speaking. I go to therapy to deal with the trauma of an abusive marriage. I said coldly, that is not instability, that is recovery, and I am not medicated. Who told you I was medicated? We just want to help. Violet interrupted, pushing the folder closer to me. Look, it is simple. You sign the land to the trust. We handle the sale. You get a stipend. It ensures that outsiders cannot get their hands on family assets. She didn't look at Marcus when she said outsiders, but the word hung in the air between us, aimed directly at his chest. I picked up the folder. I didn't open it. I just felt the weight of it, and if I don't sign, I asked. My father slammed his hand down on the table. The silverware jumped. Why do you always have to be so difficult? He shouted. His face was flushed. We are trying to save you. You think you are so smart. Harper, you think you can navigate this world alone? You are going to get eaten alive. You have no idea. What kind of debt? What kind of pressure, Gordon? My mother hissed, touching his arm. Calm down. He stopped, breathing heavily. He had said too much. What kind of debt? I looked at them. Really looked at them. My father, terrified and bullying. My mother, complicit and weak. Violet, greedy and sharp. Shane, the muscle. They weren't a family. They were a corporation facing bankruptcy. And I was the liquid asset they needed to liquidate. I am not signing. I said. I slid the folder back across the table. Violet stared at the leather cover. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes went dead. Then you are making a choice, she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. I am choosing to keep what is mine. I said, no. She said, you are choosing to leave this family. You are choosing to be alone. And you know what happens to women who are alone. Harper. They disappear. The threat was so subtle, so wrapped in concern, that if I hadn't been looking for it, I might have missed it. But I heard it. Dinner ended in a suffocating silence. We went to our room. As soon as the door clicked shut, Marcus turned to me. We need to leave, he said. Now. Tonight. I sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. We can't leave. I said, Are you insane? Marcus whispered, keeping his voice low. Did you see them? Did you hear your father, Harper? They are desperate. People do bad things when they are desperate. Shane looked at me like he was calculating how much I weigh. If we leave now, they win. I said, They will just find another way. They will file for guardianship. They will say, I had a breakdown at the lake and fled. I need to know what they are planning. I need to see the paperwork inside that folder. I need to know how deep the debt is. Harper, this isn't a game. I know. I said. I stood up and kissed him. I promise. We will leave tomorrow afternoon. Just let me survive the breakfast. I need to see if Dad slips up again. I was arrogant. I thought that because I knew their motive, I could predict their actions. I thought that because I was an auditor, I could audit my own family. I couldn't sleep. The bed sheets were too high thread count, too slippery. The room was too quiet. Marcus fell asleep beside me, his breathing heavy and rhythmic. But I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. At 13 minutes past 1 in the morning, I heard it. It was a sound that didn't belong in a vacation rental. Whir, click, whir. It was the sound of a printer. I sat up. The sound was coming from the study down the hall. Whir, click, whir. Then a pause, and then the distinct, sharp-cut chunk of a heavy-duty stapler who brings a printer to a lake house, who prints documents at 1 in the morning. I crept to the door and pressed my ear against the wood. I heard low voices. Shane and Violet. It looks legitimate. Shane's voice said. It was muffled, but I could hear the cadence. It has to be perfect. Violet replied, If the notary check fails, we are exposed. We won't be exposed, Shane said. She won't be around to contest it. My blood ran cold. She won't be around. I should have woken Marcus then. I should have climbed out the window, run to the car, and driven until the gas tank was empty. But my brain, my logical, auditor brain, tried to rationalize it. Maybe they meant I wouldn't be around because I would cut ties. Maybe they meant I wouldn't be around the closing table. I didn't want to believe they meant the other thing. I went back to bed. But I didn't sleep. I lay there, memorizing the time. 13 a.m. The sound of the stapler, the sound of the printer. I filed it away. The next morning, the sun was bright and mocking. The sky was a brutal, perfect blue. I walked out onto the deck with my coffee. The lake was glass. Down at the private dock, I saw Shane. He was standing in the smaller of the two aluminum boats, the one they would later assign to us. He wasn't fishing. He was kneeling near the stern, by the motor. He had a toolbox open next to him. I watched him. He moved with precision. He reached into the motor housing. His arm flexed. He did something with a wrench, then wiped the casing with a rag. Then, he moved to the bow. He picked up the anchor rope. He examined it, tested the knot, and then he didn't cut it. He untied it and retied it, but he retied it loosely. A slip knot. Something else. Then he stood up and looked at the safety box, the orange plastic container that holds the flares and the first aid kit. He opened it. He took something out. From where I stood, 60 feet up on the deck, I couldn't see exactly what it was, but he put something else in. 2 plastic bottles. He closed the box and latched it. Then he looked up at the house. I stepped back quickly behind the sliding glass door, my heart hammering against my ribs. He had been preparing. When I walked into the kitchen 10 minutes later, Shane was sitting at the table eating scrambled eggs. He looked up at me. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Like a baby." I lied. "Good," he said. He took a bite of eggs. "It is a great day for the water. Violet thinks we should take the boats out." I looked at his hands. They were clean, scrubbed pink, but under the fingernail of his right thumb, there was a tiny microscopic crescent of black grease. "That sounds fun," I said. I knew the game board now. Or at least, I thought I did. I thought they were just trying to scare me. I thought the boat ride was going to be another lecture, another trapped conversation on the water. I didn't know that the conversation was over. I didn't know that the printing was done, the stapling was finished, and the narrative had already been written. All that was left was for the main character to be removed from the stage. I finished my coffee. I looked at Marcus. I signaled him with my eyes. "Be ready." We walked down to the dock together. Violet was already there, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses. "You two take the small boat," she said, pointing to the aluminum shell Shane had been working on. "It is more romantic. Shane and I will take the pontoon. We can meet in the middle." "Okay," I said. I stepped into the boat. I felt the metal shift under my weight. I looked at the anchor rope. It looked normal. I looked at the safety box. It looked shut. I sat down. Marcus untied the line Shane had retied. I looked back at the house one last time. It stood there, silent and complicit, holding the secrets of the night before in its walls. "Let's go," I said. And we pushed off into the blue. The division of the fleet happened with the casual efficiency of a military operation masked as a family outing. We stood on the wooden planks of the dock, the sun already beating down with the intensity that promised violence later in the afternoon. The water slapped rhythmically against the pylons. To anyone watching from the shore, we were just a family preparing for a day of leisure. We had coolers, we had towels, we had smiles plastered on our faces like decals, but the air between us was vibrating. "Here is the plan," Violet said, clapping her hands together. She was wearing a white sarong and a wide-brimmed straw hat that cast a shadow over her eyes, hiding whatever calculations were running through her head. "Shane and I will take the pontoon. It is bigger, more stable for Mom and Dad if they decide to come down later. Harper, you and Marcus take the fishing boat." She pointed to the small, 12-foot aluminum vessel bobbing nervously in the water next to the hulking pontoon. It looked like a toy. It looked like a tin can. "Why don't we all go on the pontoon?" Marcus asked. He was standing with his arms crossed, his posture defensive. "There is plenty of room. It seats 12 people. Violet smiled, a gesture that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, come on. Marcus, don't you want some privacy? You and Harper have been so tense. I thought a little time alone on the water, just the two of you, would be romantic. Besides, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The signal out there is terrible. No emails, no calls, no distractions, just you and the water. It is exactly what Harper needs. No signal, no one to disturb you. The words landed on my skin like ice water. She wasn't offering us a vacation. She was defining the parameters of a cage. But I couldn't say that. Not yet. I had to play the game until I could flip the board. That sounds perfect, I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. Great, Shane said. He stepped forward, holding 2 orange life jackets. He tossed one to Marcus and held the other one out to me. I took it. It felt stiff in my hands. I ran my thumb over the fabric. Most rental gear is soft, faded by the sun, smelling of mildew and old gasoline. This jacket was bright, aggressive orange. The fabric was crisp. I looked at the inside collar. The label was pristine white, no fading on the printed text. But the tag, the price tag, or the barcode tag that usually hangs from the zipper had been cut. Not unlooped, but cut. The jagged plastic end of the fastener was still sticking out, sharp against my finger. It had been bought recently, probably yesterday, probably at the Walmart 20 miles down the highway. Why would they buy a new life jacket for a rental boat that comes fully equipped here? Shane said. He jumped into the aluminum boat. The metal clanged loudly. He moved to the stern, near the engine. Let me get this started for you. These 2 strokes can be temperamental if you don't know the choke. He fiddled with the motor. He primed the bulb. He pulled the cord. The engine sputtered and died. He pulled again. It roared to life, a cloud of blue smoke puffing out over the water. There, he said. He looked at me, his eyes hidden behind polarized Oakley sunglasses. She is purring. He stepped out of the boat and held out a hand to help me in. I ignored it and stepped onto the bench seat myself. I sat in the back, near the tiller. Marcus sat in the middle. Keys, Shane said. He held up the ignition key. It was attached to a yellow foam float, the kind that keeps keys from sinking if you drop them. He looked at it for a second, then looked at me. Actually, he said, slipping the key into the ignition switch but detaching the yellow float. I will hang on to the float. You don't need it dragging in the wind. And knowing you, you might fidget with it and drop the whole thing overboard. It was a throwaway line, a joke about my nervous habits. Knowing you, but it felt wrong. The float is the safety mechanism. You don't separate the float from the key. That defeats the purpose. But before I could argue, he had already pocketed the foam buoy and was stepping back onto the dock. Wait, Marcus said. He was looking around the floor of the boat. Where are the paddles? Shane paused. He was halfway to the pontoon. He turned back, a grin spreading across his face that looked more like a grimace. Paddles. Shane laughed. Marcus, buddy, this isn't a canoe. You have a 15-horsepower Mercury on the back. Who uses paddles on this lake? We are going to the middle, not crossing the Atlantic. It is safety regulation, Marcus insisted. If the engine dies... The engine won't die, Shane said, his voice hardening. I just checked it myself. Don't be such a buzzkill. Marcus, trust the equipment. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and untied the pontoon. I looked down at the floor of our boat. No paddles, no anchor, just the metal ribs and the black rubber matting. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. What are you doing? Marcus asked, his voice low. Documentation, I whispered. I held the phone down near my hip, angling it so it wasn't obvious. I snapped a photo of the ignition with the key in it. I snapped a photo of the empty oar locks. I snapped a photo of the bow where the anchor rope should have been. I even snapped a photo of the red plastic gas tank. I didn't know why I was doing it. It was just the auditor in me. When something feels wrong, you create a paper trail. If the numbers don't add up, you scan the receipts. These photos were my receipts. Ready, Violet called from the pontoon. She was already at the helm, a drink in her hand. Ready? I lied. I twisted the throttle. The engine whined, and we backed away from the dock. The lake was massive. Juniper Ridge Reservoir is a sprawling body of water, carved into the mountains, with fingers of water reaching deep into narrow canyons. The water was a deep, impenetrable blue. We followed the pontoon. Violet drove fast, pushing the big boat up onto a plain, churning a massive white wake behind them. Our little aluminum shell slammed against the waves, vibrating so hard my teeth ached. Spray flew over the bow, soaking Marcus. They didn't head for the popular spots. They didn't go toward the marina or the public beaches where specks of colorful umbrellas lined the shore. They headed west, toward the dam, toward the widest, deepest part of the reservoir, where the cliffs rose straight up from the water, and there were no cabins, no docks, no witnesses. We drove for 20 minutes. The shoreline receded until the trees were just green textures in the distance. Finally, the pontoon slowed down. Violet cut the engine. The boat settled into the water, rocking gently. I pulled back on the throttle and killed our engine. The silence rushed in instantly, swallowing the roar of the motors. "Perfect spot!" Violet yelled across the water. They were about 50 feet away. "Look at that view." It was beautiful, terrifyingly beautiful. We were in a bowl of blue, suspended over depths I didn't want to think about. "Let's just drift for a bit," Shane called out. "Have a drink." I watched them. Violet opened a cooler. Shane cracked a beer. They looked relaxed. They looked like they were waiting for something. "I don't like this," Marcus said. He wiped the spray from his face. "We are too far out." "I know," I said. The sun was directly overhead now. It was oppressive. The heat reflected off the aluminum floor of the boat, creating a convection oven effect. I felt the exhaustion of the last 3 days hitting me all at once. The sleepless night listening to the printer, the stress of the dinner, the adrenaline of the morning. My eyes felt heavy, just for a second. I needed to blink. The gentle rocking of the boat was hypnotic. "I'm just going to close my eyes," I mumbled to Marcus. "Just for a minute. The glare is giving me a headache." "I'm watching them," Marcus said. "Rest." I leaned my head back against the rim of the boat. I pulled my hat down over my face. I didn't intend to sleep. I just wanted to shut out the light. But the body betrays you when you push it too far. I didn't just blink. I fell into a microsleep, a blackout. It might have been 5 minutes. It might have been 15. It was that heavy, leaden unconsciousness that comes from pure mental burnout. I was dreaming of a printer. Whir, click, whir. Then, the sound changed. It became a hum, a buzz, a roar. My eyes snapped open. The light had shifted. The shadows inside the boat were different. I sat up, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Marcus!" He was slumped forward, his head on his knees, asleep passed out from the heat. The sun was brutal. "Marcus." I shook him. He groaned, disoriented. I looked at the water. The pontoon was gone. No, not gone. Distant. I saw a white speck far away, moving rapidly toward the eastern arm of the lake, the wake trailing behind it like a scar. The sound I had heard was their engine fading into the distance. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the heat haze. I lunged for the back of the boat. I reached for the ignition. My hand grasped empty air. The key was gone. I stared at the ignition slot. It was a gaping mouth. The metal around it was scratched, but the key Shane had put in, the key without the float was missing. I spun around. "The paddles!" I screamed at Marcus. "Check under the seat." I knew they weren't there. I had photographed the empty locks, but desperation makes you check for things you know aren't real. Marcus was scrambling, lifting the cushions, kicking the backpack. "They're not here," he yelled. "Harper, where is the key?" "They took it," I whispered. "What?" "They took it," I said louder. "They came back while we were out. They drifted close. Shane, he must have." I looked at the pontoon again. It was just a dot now. They hadn't just left us. They had robbed us. They had stripped the car and left it on the tracks. I looked around the boat. The anchor rope I had seen Shane retying gone. The cleat was bare. We were floating in a metal tub, 5 miles from the nearest land, with no propulsion, no communication, and the sun hammering down like a judge's gavel. "They left us," Marcus said. He sounded like a child who had just realized the monster under the bed was real. "They actually left us." "No," I said, my mind racing back to the sound of the printer, the papers, the look in Violet's eyes. "They didn't just leave us, Marcus. They erased us." I looked down at the floorboard where my backpack lay, and that was when I saw the rock, the smooth gray stone that hadn't been there before. I reached for it. My hand trembled. Under the rock was a piece of paper. I unfolded it. The white paper was blinding in the sun. "You chose this." The world tilted. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a lesson. This was an execution. I looked at the water. It was perfectly flat, perfectly silent. And in that silence, I realized the terrifying truth: we were alone. And being alone out here wasn't peaceful. It was fatal. Panic is a biological chemical dump. It floods the system, overrides the frontal lobe, and tells the muscles to run even when there is nowhere to run. I watched that chemical dump hit Marcus. His eyes dilated, swallowing the iris. His breathing turned into jagged, shallow gasps. He stood up, rocking the small aluminum shell violently, his gaze fixed on the distant, blurry line of trees. "I can make it," he stammered. "I used to swim varsity. It is not that far. Harper, I am going to swim." He started to strip off his shirt. "Sit down," I said. My voice was low, but it had the density of a stone. "We can't just sit here," he yelled, his voice cracking. "They left us to fry. I am going." He put one leg over the gunwale. The boat tipped dangerously, taking on a cup of water over the side. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I lunged. I grabbed the waistband of his shorts and yanked him backward with every ounce of leverage I had. He lost his balance and fell back into the boat, his head hitting the aluminum bench with a hollow thud. "You are not swimming," I said, leaning over him, pinning him down with my glare. "Listen to me. That water is 50 degrees just below the surface. Hypothermia will set in within 20 minutes. You are already dehydrated. Your muscles will cramp before you make it a quarter of a mile. If you get in that water without a plan, you are committing suicide. And if you die, they win. Do you understand me? If you die, my sister gets to tell the story of how reckless we were." He stared up at me, chest heaving. The reality of my words began to seep through the adrenaline. "They want us to panic," I said, releasing his shirt. "That is the variable they are counting on. We are not going to give it to them." I turned my back on him and went to the motor. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I needed to treat this like a crime scene, not a tragedy. I popped the latch on the engine cover. It came off easily, too easily. I looked at the internal mechanics. I am not a mechanic, but I know what an engine looks like. I know that wires are supposed to be connected. The spark plug wires hadn't just vibrated loose. They had been pulled off, and the emergency kill switch wire, the one that cuts the engine if you fall overboard, had been bypassed and severed. The copper ends were clean. They had been cut with wire strippers. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a deactivation. Shane had done this while we were drifting. He must have done it in seconds. He knew exactly where to cut. "It is dead," I said, replacing the cover. "Mechanically sabotage. We are drifting." I looked at the sun. It was high, white, and punishing. We had 0 propulsion. We had no shade. We had 32 ounces of water. "Okay," I said. "Routine. We need a routine." I grabbed the 2 life jackets, the new ones, the ones with the cut tags. "Put this on," I ordered Marcus. "It is too hot," he complained. "Put it on. If you pass out from heat stroke and fall over, I can't pull you back in. The jacket keeps you floating." I put mine on. It was suffocating, but I cinched the straps tight. Then I took the extra length of the nylon straps and tied a complex knot around the plastic buckles. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked. He was sitting up now, rubbing his head. Double securing, I said. If the plastic gets brittle or snaps, the knot holds. Murphy's Law. I took the 2 water bottles out of the bag. I looked at the time on Marcus's watch. My phone was dead overheated or out of battery. It didn't matter. It was a paperweight. 1 sip, I said. Every hour. Not a gulp. A sip. Wet your mouth. Swallow. That is it. I took the protein bar and broke it into 4 equal pieces. We eat 1 piece at sunset. Digestion uses water. We don't eat while the sun is up. Marcus looked at me. There was fear in his eyes, but also something else, respect, or maybe just shock. He had never seen this version of me. He knew Harper the girlfriend, Harper the reader. He didn't know Harper the survivor of a 10-year psychological war with her own bloodline. Now, I said, we leave a record. I picked up the plastic first aid box. It was bright orange, hard plastic. I dug into my pocket. I didn't have a pen, but I had my keys. My house keys, which were in my pocket. Not on the boat key ring. I took the sharpest key I had and started scratching into the lid of the orange box. Harper Thomas, Marcus Lane, abandoned June 14th. Violet, Shane, Gordon, Elaine, took keys, took oars, no accident. The plastic curled up in white ribbons as I carved the letters. It was slow work. My fingers cramped, but I carved deep. Ink fades. Scratches are permanent. If they find the boat, and we aren't in it, I told Marcus, showing him the lid. This tells the sheriff who to arrest. Marcus stared at the jagged letters. We are going to make it. Harper. We are, I said, but audits require documentation. I handed him the box. Put this in the waterproof bag. Clip it to your belt loop. Do not take it off. I went back to checking our inventory. I patted down the pockets of my life jacket. Empty. I patted down the pockets of Marcus's jacket. I felt a hard lump in the small Velcro pocket near the shoulder. What is this? I asked. I ripped the Velcro open. My heart stopped, then restarted with a violent kick. It was a whistle, a cheap, orange plastic safety whistle attached to a small lanyard. They had bought new jackets to ensure the old gear, which might have had flares or mirrors, was gone. But they had been sloppy. They hadn't checked the pockets of the new merchandise. They had assumed the jackets were just foam and fabric. I put the whistle to my lips and blew. It was shrill, piercing, a sound that cut through the silence like a knife. We have a voice, I said. I felt a grim smile tug at the corner of my mouth. They forgot to take away our voice. But a whistle is useless if there is no one to hear it. The lake was empty. We were drifting toward the center, pushed by a subtle current. We are moving the wrong way, Marcus observed. The current is taking us toward the dam. He was right. The dam meant deep water. It meant isolation. I looked at the boat. We needed drag. We needed to slow the drift. Give me the backpack, I said. I emptied the bag. I took the heavy rubber floor mat from the front of the boat. It was loose. Just lying there, I rolled it up and shoved it into the backpack. I added the empty cooler. I zipped it up. Do we have any rope? Marcus asked. No, I said, but we have clothes. I took off my denim overshirt. I twisted the sleeves. I made Marcus take off his belt. I used the straps from the backpack. I fashioned a crude line, tying the bag to the front cleat of the boat. I threw the bag overboard. It hit the water and sank, dragging behind us. The line went taut. The boat shuddered and slowed. It wasn't an anchor, but it was a brake. It turned the bow into the wind, stabilizing us. Sea anchor, I said. Physics. We sat in the silence for 2 hours. The sun moved across the sky, a slow-motion torture device. My skin felt tight. My lips were cracking. Marcus was drifting in and out of consciousness, his head bobbing. I watched the sky. Then I saw them. Birds. 3 gulls. They were flying high, moving with purpose, not circling, commuting. They were flying west-northwest. Birds go to land, I whispered. I looked at the water. The drift was taking us south. The birds were going northwest. We had to move. I looked at Marcus. He was in no shape to swim. If he got in the water, he would panic, thrash, and drown. But I couldn't paddle the boat with my hands. The freeboard was too high, and the angle was impossible. "Marcus," I said. "Wake up." He blinked at me, his eyes red. "We are changing tactics," I said. "I am going into the water." "No," he rasped. "Harper, no." "I am not leaving you," I said. "I am the engine. You are the rudder." I took the makeshift rope attached to the sea anchor. I hauled the bag back in. I untied the anchor and tied the line around my waist. I double knotted it. "I am going to tow us," I said. "You can't," he said. "The boat is too heavy." "Aluminum is light," I said, "and once it is moving, momentum takes over. I just need to break the inertia." I looked him in the eye. "Your job is to sit perfectly still in the center of the boat. Keep the bow pointed at those birds. If you move, the drag increases. If you panic, I get tired. You have to be a statue. Can you do that?" He nodded. "I can be a statue." I checked my whistle. It was around my neck. I lowered myself over the side. The cold was a shock, stealing the breath from my lungs. It felt like being punched in the chest. I gasped, treading water, letting my body adjust. "Okay," I said. "Here we go." I turned toward the northwest. I started to swim. It wasn't a sprint. It was a breaststroke. Kick, glide, pull. The line went taut. I felt the weight of the boat on my hips. It felt like I was trying to pull a mountain. Kick, glide, pull. Nothing happened. Then, slowly, agonizingly, I felt it. The resistance gave way. The boat moved, inch by inch. I found a rhythm. I didn't look at the shore. Looking at the destination breaks you because it never seems to get closer. I looked at the water in front of my face. 1 stroke. My mother is a liar. 2 strokes. My father is a thief. 3 strokes. Violet is a coward. I fueled myself with hate. It is a powerful energy source, cleaner than hope, and it burns longer. I swam for what felt like hours. Every 20 minutes, I would stop, swim back to the boat, and hang onto the gunwale to breathe. I wouldn't climb in. Climbing in and out takes too much energy. I just hung there, my legs dangling in the black depth, sharing a sip of water with Marcus. "You are doing it," he whispered during the 3rd break. "I can see the trees getting bigger." "Don't look at the trees," I gasped. "Look at the bow." I pushed off again. My shoulders were screaming. My skin felt raw where the life jacket rubbed against my neck. But I didn't stop. I was a machine. I was an auditor closing the books on the longest fiscal year in history. Then I heard it, a low thrumming sound. I stopped kicking. I trod water, lifting my head. It wasn't the wind. It was deeper, a motor. I spun around in the water. "Marcus," I yelled. "Do you see it?" He was standing up, balancing precariously. There, 2 o'clock, a fishing boat. It was a small vessel, maybe half a mile away, moving parallel to us. They wouldn't see us. We were too low in the water. Just a gray speck against the gray waves. I grabbed the whistle. I blew. Screech. I took a breath and blew again. 3 short blasts. The universal distress signal. Screech. 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 I waited. The boat kept moving. "They don't hear us," Marcus yelled, waving his shirt frantically. I blew again. I blew until my lungs burned, until black spots danced in my vision. I put all my rage, all my fear, all my desire to see Violet in a courtroom into that plastic pea. The boat didn't turn. I felt a sob rise in my throat. Then, the boat slowed down. It stopped. It turned. A white wake appeared as the bow swung around. It was coming toward us. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just let my legs go limp and floated in the life jacket, watching salvation approach at 20 knots. The boat was an old fiberglass whaler, scarred and battered, smelling of bait and diesel. The man behind the wheel was young, maybe 30, with grease-stained hands and a trucker hat pulled low. He cut the engine 10 yards from us. He looked at me in the water. He looked at Marcus in the boat. He looked at the rope tied around my waist. He didn't ask, "Are you okay?" He reached over the side and hauled me up. His grip was strong, his hands rough. He pulled me onto the deck like I was a prize catch. Then he maneuvered the boat to grab Marcus. We collapsed on the deck of his boat, gasping, dripping, alive. The man stood over us. He was wearing a shirt that said, "Cedar Hollow Marina Staff." He looked at our boat. He looked at the empty transom where the keys should be. He looked at the empty oar locks. Then he looked at me. "I am Rafe," he said. "I work on these boats. I know this hull." He pointed a greasy finger at our boat. "Who the hell stripped the safety gear?" he asked. "And why is the ignition wire cut?" I looked up at him. I coughed up lake water and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "My name is Harper Thomas," I said, "and I would like to hire you as an expert witness." Rafe blinked. "Lady, you need a doctor." "I need a lawyer," I said. "But first, I need you to take a picture of that engine before you tow it in. Can you do that for me?" "Rafe?" He looked at the engine again. He saw what I saw. He saw the intent. "Yeah," he said slowly, his face darkening. "Yeah, I can take a picture. Someone tried to kill you folks." "Yes," I said, closing my eyes as the adrenaline finally crashed. "But they failed, and now they are going to pay." The silence of the marina was worse than the silence of the lake. When Rafe towed us into the slip at Cedar Hollow, the sun was beginning to dip, casting long, bruised shadows across the water. I expected sirens. I expected a frantic mother pacing the dock. I expected my father shouting instructions to a search party. I expected, at the very least. The performance of concern, there was nothing. The slip where the pontoon boat should have been was empty. Their car was gone from the gravel lot. The rental house up on the ridge was dark. Rafe killed the engine of his whaler. The sudden quiet felt heavy. He looked at the empty dock, then back at me. I was shivering violently now, the adrenaline crash colliding with the onset of hypothermia. My skin felt like it was 2 sizes too tight for my body. "Where are they?" Rafe asked. He sounded angry. "You have been out there for 7 hours. Nobody called it in." "No," I said, my teeth chattering. "They didn't call it in because they didn't want us found." Rafe tied off his boat and helped me onto the wooden planks. My legs were jelly. Marcus stumbled, bracing himself against a pylon. He looked like a ghost, his skin a road map of red burns. "I am calling the sheriff," Rafe said, pulling out his phone. "Do it," I said. "And Rafe, don't touch our boat. Don't let anyone touch it. That engine is evidence." "I got you," he said. We were taken to the urgent care clinic in Cedar Hollow by a deputy who looked barely old enough to shave. He was polite but confused. He kept asking if we had just drifted too far. He didn't understand that drift is a passive act, and what happened to us was active engineering. The doctor was a woman named Dr. Aris. She was efficient and unsmiling. She documented everything, and for the first time, I felt the cold comfort of a paper trail. "Second-degree sunburn on 40% of the body," she dictated to her nurse. "Severe dehydration. Patient requires 2 liters of saline." Then she looked at my waist. I had been towing a 12-foot aluminum boat for hours. The improvised rope my shirt and the backpack straps had dug into my flesh. There was a raw, bloody ring around my midsection, purple and angry. "Ligature marks," she said, her voice changing. She looked me in the eye. "This looks like you were bound." "I was the engine," I told her. "I had to tow us back." She paused, the pen hovering over the chart. "I need to photograph this, for the record." "Take the picture," I said. "Take all of them." It was while I was sitting on the crinkly paper of the exam table, an IV line cold in my arm, that I turned my phone back on. It had shut down from the heat, but the clinic air conditioning had revived it. Messages flooded in. but not the ones you would expect. There were 0 missed calls from my mother, 0 from my father, 0 from Violet, but there was an email from Violet. Sent 2 hours ago. Subject: We are worried about you. Harper, we waited at the marina for hours. You and Marcus just vanished. Dad is terrified you are having one of your episodes again. We drove back to the city to consult with the family attorney about how to handle this. We just want you safe. Please don't do anything rash. I stared at the screen. The brilliance of it was sickening. She was planting the flag. One of your episodes. Consult with the attorney. She wasn't looking for a rescue team. She was building a defense. I looked at the timestamp. She had sent this while I was swimming, while I was swallowing lake water and begging my muscles not to quit. She was drafting an email to establish a narrative of mental instability. Marcus, I said. He was in the bed next to me, eyes closed. Yeah. They are already spinning it. We need a lawyer. Not a family lawyer. A shark. I didn't call my usual contacts. I called Naomi Klein. Naomi was a litigator I had met once at a compliance conference. She was famous for 2 things: her collection of vintage motorcycles and her absolute refusal to settle when she smelled blood. She worked out of Denver, but she had a reach that covered the whole state. She picked up on the second ring. Klein, she answered. Naomi, it is Harper Thomas. I need to hire you. Tonight. I am expensive. Harper. And I'm having dinner. My family just left me and my fiancé to die in the middle of Juniper Ridge Reservoir. They disabled our boat. They took the oars, and now they are emailing me about my mental health to cover their tracks. There was a silence on the other end. Then I heard the sound of silverware being put down on a plate. Start from the beginning, she said, and do not leave out a single detail. I told her everything: the trust, the iPad search history, the printer at 1:13 in the morning, the cut wires, the whistle. When I finished, Naomi's voice was different. It was the voice of a general inspecting the troops. This is not a family dispute, she said. This is attempted negligent homicide, possibly conspiracy. But Harper, listen to me. They are going to hit you with the crazy card. It is the oldest play in the book for discrediting a female witness. They will say you staged it for attention. They will say you are off your meds. I know, I said. We need to secure the physical evidence, she said. I am sending a private investigator to the marina tonight to back up Rafe's photos. And I need you to file a police report immediately, not a missing persons report. A criminal complaint. The sheriff is on his way, I said. Good. Don't act like a daughter. Harper, act like a plaintiff. This is a case now. Detective Mason Reeve walked into the exam room 10 minutes later. He was a heavy-set man with tired eyes and a notebook that looked like it had been through a washing machine. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a man who just wanted to finish his shift. Ms. Thomas, he said. Mr. Lane, I spoke to the marina employee, Rafe. Did you see the boat? I asked. I saw it, Reeve said. He pulled a chair up and sat down heavily. Wires don't usually cut themselves, and oars don't usually jump out of the locks. My brother-in-law, Shane Rourke, prepped the boat, I said. He insisted we take that specific one. He took the keys. He separated the float from the key ring. Reeve wrote this down. That is a serious accusation. It is a serious crime, Marcus said. His voice was raspy. They left us out there, detective. They didn't call you. Ask yourself why a family doesn't call the police when their daughter goes missing on a lake. Reeve looked up from his notebook. I did check the dispatch logs. No calls from any Rourke or Thomas. The only call came from Rafe. He tapped his pen against the paper. I need to know about the contract. Who rented the house? My father, Gordon Thomas, I said. But Violet handled the logistics. I will need to speak to them, Reeve said. But I will be honest with you. Without video of him cutting the line, it is a he said, she said situation. They are going to say it was an accident or that you did it. I didn't tow a boat for 3 miles with a strap cutting into my waist as a prank. Detective, I snapped. I lifted my shirt to show him the purple welt. He looked at it. He winced. No, I guess you didn't. My phone buzzed again. It was an alert from my work email. I have it synced to my personal phone. Urgent HR matter. My stomach dropped. I opened it. It was from the head of human resources at Redwood Meridian Compliance. Dear Harper, we received a concerning communication regarding your medical status and capacity. Given the sensitive nature of your role in auditing, we are placing you on administrative leave pending a review. Please do not access the server. Violet. She hadn't just called a lawyer. She had emailed my boss. She was trying to cut off my income. If I lost my job, I lost my leverage. I lost the ability to pay Naomi. She went for the job, I whispered. What? Marcus asked. Violet, I said. She contacted Redwood. She told them I am compromised. I showed the email to Naomi, who was still on speakerphone. That is actionable, Naomi said instantly. Tortious interference with a contract. Defamation. Keep that email. Harper, they are scared. They are throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. They wouldn't be attacking your credibility this hard if they weren't terrified of what you know. Then, my phone rang. The screen said Mom. I looked at Marcus. I looked at Detective Reeve. Answer it, Reeve said softly. Put it on speaker. I slid the bar. Harper? My mother's voice was trembling. It was a perfect performance of maternal anxiety. Oh, thank God. Violet said you finally called someone. Where are you? We have been sick with worry. We thought you just took the boat and left. You thought I left, I said. My voice was dead calm. Without a car. You thought I drove a boat onto the highway. We didn't know what to think, she cried. You have been so unhappy lately. We thought maybe you just wanted to get away. We were giving you space. Space? I repeated. In the middle of a reservoir without water. Harper, please, my father's voice cut in. He sounded stern, the patriarch trying to regain control. Stop the drama. We are all tired. We are at the hotel in Denver. Just drive down here. We can talk about this. Don't make a scene. You know how your mother gets. Don't make a scene. The family motto. I am at the clinic. Dad, I said. Detective Reeve is here with me. He is very interested in the cut wires on the engine. There was a silence on the line. A total, suffocating vacuum. Police, my father whispered. You called the police on your own family. I reported a crime, I said. If you didn't commit one, you have nothing to worry about. You ungrateful. Shane's voice came from the background, muffled but distinct. Tell her Marcus put her up to this. Tell her we know he's just a gold digger trying to scam the trust. I heard that, Detective Reeve said loudly, leaning toward the phone. This is Detective Reeve, Cedar Hollow Sheriff's Department. I would advise you all to stay in the state. I will be contacting you for statements. The line went dead. They hung up. I looked at the phone. My hand was shaking, but I felt a strange clarity. The umbilical cord was cut. Finally. They are going to blame Marcus, I said. That is the next move. Shane just said it. They will say Marcus sabotaged the boat to trap me there and play the hero, or to sue the family. Let them try, Marcus said. He reached over and took my hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were furious. I don't care what they say about me. I care that they tried to kill you. Naomi's voice came through the speaker again. Harper, listen to me. This is going to get ugly. They are going to drag your divorce into this. They are going to drag your therapy records into this. But remember this, whoever tells the story first usually wins in the court of public opinion, but whoever tells the story with evidence wins in the court of law. We have the evidence, I said. I have the photos. I have the emails. I have the doctor's report. I have the text messages. Good, Naomi said. Because by tomorrow morning, Violet will have filed for an emergency guardianship order. She's going to try to take away your legal right to sue her. We have to file first. I looked at the ligature mark on my waist. I looked at the sunburn on Marcus's face. File it, I said. File everything. I am not going back to the lake to cry. I am going to the courthouse. I hung up the phone. The sun had fully set now. The clinic window reflected my face back to me. I looked wild. My hair was matted with lake water. My lips were cracked. My eyes were dark hollows. But I didn't look like a victim. I looked like someone who had survived the water and was now ready to burn the house down. "Detective," I said, "I want to press charges for attempted murder, fraud, and unlawful imprisonment, and I want to start with the printer." "The printer?" Reeve asked, confused. "Yes," I said. "The printer they used at 1:13 in the morning to print a suicide note they planned to plant on my body." Reeve opened a fresh page in his notebook. "Tell me about the note," I told him. And as I spoke, I realized that the story I was telling wasn't just about revenge, it was about survival. And I was going to make sure that every single word of it was entered into the public record. The transition from victim to plaintiff is a shift in gravity. One moment you are floating, weightless and helpless, and the next you are grounded, heavy with the density of facts. We set up a war room in a small conference area at the hotel where Naomi Klein had set up shop. It was less than 24 hours since Rafe had pulled us from the water, but the pile of evidence on the table was already growing, transforming my trauma into a timeline. Rafe was our first victory. He didn't just bring his testimony, he brought the paperwork. He walked in holding a clipboard that contained the daily checkout log for the marina's rental fleet. "Every boat that goes out has to pass a safety inspection," Rafe told us, tapping the paper with a grease-stained finger. "It is state regulation, but it is also insurance policy. Look here." He pointed to a checklist dated the morning of our departure. Boat 14, aluminum fishing hull, life jackets. 4, verified. Oars. 2, verified. Fire extinguisher, verified. Spare key, float verified. First aid kit, verified. "I did this check myself at 6 in the morning, Rafe said. "The boat was fully stocked, 2 oars, locked in the side clamps, and the spare key is always zip-tied under the stern seat in a magnetic box. Always." "When we got on the boat," I said, my voice steady, "the clamps were empty, and there was no magnetic box." "Exactly," Rafe said. "Someone stripped it, and they did it between 6 in the morning and 9 when you boarded." Naomi leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Is there surveillance?" "That is the other thing," Rafe said. He pulled a USB drive from his pocket. I pulled the footage from the fuel dock camera. It captures the edge of the rental slip. We plugged it into Naomi's laptop. The video was grainy, typical security feed quality, but the figure was unmistakable. It was 8:15 in the morning. Shane. He wasn't just standing by the boat. He was inside it. He was bent over the stern seat, his arm working vigorously. Then he stood up, looking left and right, and walked to his SUV. He was carrying something long and slender wrapped in a towel. "The oars," Marcus whispered. "He wrapped them so nobody would see him walking off the dock with them." "And look at his other hand," Naomi pointed out. "He is putting something in his pocket. Small, square." "The magnetic key box," Rafe confirmed. "This is premeditation," Naomi said, typing furiously. "This destroys the accidental drift defense. You don't accidentally remove the means of propulsion an hour before the voyage." But the physical evidence was just the skeleton. We needed the muscle, the motive. Why now? Why this weekend? That answer came from a digital forensic search that Naomi's investigator ran on public records filings. While we were struggling to survive on the water, a document had been filed with the county clerk in Fort Gray. It was a durable power of attorney. Naomi slid the printout across the table to me. "Recognize this." I stared at it. It was dated 3 days ago. It granted Gordon Thomas, my father, full control over my assets, including real estate and mineral rights, in the event of my incapacitation or unavailability, and at the bottom, there was a signature. Harper Thomas. My blood ran cold. It looked like my signature. It had the same slant, the same loop on the H. To a bank teller, it would pass, but to me it was a clumsy forgery. "The T," I said, pointing at the letter. "I never cross my T from left to right. I cross it right to left. It is a muscle memory thing from being left-handed. This crossbar goes left to right, and the pressure point is wrong. See the ink blot at the end. That is someone hesitating. They filed this the morning you left for the lake, Naomi said. They needed you incapacitated or unavailable to trigger it. Being lost on a lake counts as unavailable. If you had stayed missing for even 48 hours, your father could have legally sold your land to the trust using this document. They didn't just want to kill me, I realized, feeling a wave of nausea. They wanted to erase me legally before they erased me physically. Then came the digital footprint from the rental house. Naomi's investigator had managed to subpoena the ISP logs for the rental property. Citing an imminent threat to life, we matched the data spikes to the timeline I had memorized. 1:13 in the morning. The printer. The logs showed a device named Violet_MacBook_Pro, sending a print command to the wireless HP printer in the study. The file name was recovered from the print spooler history. Note_v3.docx. Version 3, Marcus said, shaking his head in disbelief. They went through drafts. They workshopped a suicide note. And here's the kicker, Naomi said. She held up another piece of paper. It was an email thread her team had uncovered during a sweep of Violet's compromised business account. Naomi had friends in high places who could fast-track a warrant when kidnapping was on the table. The email was from Violet to the land broker. Davis, sent 2 days before the trip. Davis, hold the offer. We are handling the transfer internally. Harper is going to sign. She is stubborn. But we are taking her to a place where she will get some perspective. She will sign, or she will learn what it really means to be lonely. We will have the deed ready by Tuesday. She will learn what it really means to be lonely. It was a direct echo of the threat she had made at dinner. It wasn't just a figure of speech. It was a tactical plan. Isolation as a weapon. My phone buzzed. It was Naomi's office line. Hold on, she said. She answered, listened for a moment, and then her eyebrows shot up. She put the phone on speaker. Say that again, Naomi said. It was Elaine, my mother. I just want to know if she is okay. My mother's voice came through, thin and trembling. She wasn't calling me. She was calling my lawyer. She was trying to bypass the confrontation. She is alive, Mrs. Thomas, Naomi said coldly. No thanks to the family. It wasn't supposed to go that far, Elaine stammered. The panic in her voice was real. Violet said we just needed to scare her. Just let them drift for a few hours. Make her realize she needs us. Make her realize she can't handle things alone. We were going to go back for them before sunset. But the wind took them out so fast. You are admitting to a conspiracy to endanger life, Mrs. Thomas, Naomi said, her finger hovering over the record button on her digital dictaphone. You are admitting you plan to strand them. We needed the signature, Elaine cried out. Gordon is in trouble. Okay. The gambling debts, they are going to take the house. We needed the land money. Violet said it was the only way. Harper is so selfish. She wouldn't help. Selfish, I whispered. I couldn't help myself. Mom, you left me to die because Dad lost money playing poker. There was a gasp on the other end. She hadn't known I was listening. Harper. She wept. We didn't want you to die. We just wanted you to yield. Naomi ended the call. We have it. That is the admission. We just wanted her to yield. That is coercion. That is kidnapping. That turns the forgery into part of a violent felony. But they weren't done fighting. An hour later, my phone pinged with a notification from Redwood Meridian. I had been dreading this, the suspension. But when I opened the email, it wasn't a suspension notice. It was a retraction. Dear Ms. Thomas, regarding our previous communication, Ms. Klein has provided us with the preliminary police report and the medical assessment from Dr. Aris regarding your injuries. We apologize for the misunderstanding. We have blocked all incoming emails from the external addresses associated with your family. Your position is secure. Take all the time you need. Naomi smiled. I sent them the photo of the ligature marks around your waist and the police case number. Corporate HR departments are terrified of liability. If they fired a victim of attempted murder because the murderer sent a mean email, they would be sued into oblivion. I reminded them of that. Violet's attempt to destroy my career had backfired. Instead of isolating me, she had forced my employer to pick a side, and they had picked the one with the police report. Then came the final piece of the puzzle. The one that proved the cruelty was retail bought. Marcus had been quiet for hours, sitting in the corner with the plastic bag of supplies we had saved from the boat. The pathetic survival kit they had left us. He was examining the water bottles. "Harper," he said. "Look at this." He held up the protein bar. It was a generic brand, but there was a price sticker on the wrapper. Usually, these bars are sold in boxes, but this one had an individual tag, Market Street Provisions, $2.99. Market Street Provisions is a high-end boutique grocer in Denver, Marcus said. It is not a gas station snack. It is that fancy place Violet loves, the one near her yoga studio. "So," I asked. "Look at the date on the sticker," he said. I squinted. The sticker gun had printed a date code, 06-12. "June 12th, Marcus said. 2 days before we left, she bought this survival bar in Denver, 48 hours before we even got to the lake. She didn't grab leftovers from the pantry. She went shopping for our stranding. Investigator," Naomi barked at her assistant. "Subpoena the transaction records for Market Street Provisions for June 12th. Look for a purchase under Violet Rourke's card involving 2 water bottles, 1 protein bar, and let me guess, a generic first aid kit." "Got it," the assistant said. The picture was complete. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a prank gone wrong. It was a meticulously crafted torture chamber. They had forged the power of attorney. They had written the suicide note. They had bought the meager supplies to sustain us just long enough to suffer but not escape. They had disabled the boat. They had removed the oars, and they had waited for us to break. The only thing they hadn't planned for was that I wouldn't break. I would tow the boat. "One last thing," Rafe said. He had been checking his text messages. "You are not going to believe this." "What?" I asked. "Shane just texted me," Rafe said. He held up his phone. The message read, "Hey buddy, tough day. Listen, if the cops ask about the checklist, maybe you made a mistake. Maybe you checked the wrong boat, $5,000 cash. If you remember that you might have checked boat 15 instead of 14, Naomi laughed. It was a sharp, dangerous sound. "Witness tampering," she said. "Bribery? Oh, Shane, you just handed us the keys to the jail cell." "Reply to him," Naomi instructed Rafe. "Tell him you are confused. Keep him talking. Every text is another nail in the coffin." I looked at the whiteboard where we had drawn out the timeline. It was a web of malice. "They are done," Marcus said. "They have to be done." "No," I said, staring at the name Violet on the board. "They are not done. Violet hasn't panicked yet. Elaine panicked. Shane panicked. But Violet? She is quiet. And that scares me." "She is filing for guardianship," Naomi said. "That is her only play left. She has to convince a judge that you are insane before we can convince a judge she is a criminal. It is a race to the courthouse." "Then let's race," I said. "I have the truth on my side. And for the first time in my life, I have the receipts." I touched the bandage on my waist. The pain was sharp, grounding. "Violet wanted me to learn to be lonely," I said softly. "But she forgot one thing. When you strip everything away from a person, you don't make them lonely. You make them dangerous." The courtroom smelled of floor wax, old wood, and the specific, acrid scent of anxiety. It was not a criminal trial. Not yet. This was a probate hearing, a civil procedure usually reserved for elderly parents with dementia or trust fund children who have spiraled into addiction. But today, the subject of the emergency petition for temporary guardianship was me. I sat at the defendant's table next to Naomi Klein. My hands were folded on the table. I wore a navy blue blazer that hid the bandages around my waist where the rope burns were still weeping. Across the aisle, my family sat in a row like a choir of grievers. Violet was wearing a modest gray dress, her hair loose and soft, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Shane sat stiffly beside her, his jaw set in a line of granite. My parents, Gordon and Elaine, looked small and fragile, holding hands. To the casual observer, they looked like a loving family trying to save their daughter from herself. "Your Honor," Violet's lawyer began. He was a man with a voice like warm syrup. "We are not here to punish Ms. Thomas. We are here to protect her. The events of the past weekend, the erratic behavior, the disappearance on the lake, the paranoia regarding her family. These are all symptoms of a severe mental decline following her divorce. The family is simply asking for temporary control over her financial and legal decisions until she can receive the help she desperately needs." He called their first witness, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, a woman named Sarah who lived 2 states away. "Harper has always been intense," Sarah told the court, avoiding my eyes. "Since the divorce, she posts things online that seem angry. She isolates herself. Violet told me she was worried Harper might hurt herself." It was hearsay wrapped in concern. It was vague enough to be irrefutable, but damaging enough to plant the seed. Harper is unstable. I felt Marcus stiffen on the bench behind me. I reached back and touched his knee. "Wait," I signaled. When it was Naomi's turn, she didn't stand up. She stayed seated, flipping open a binder with a snap that echoed in the high-ceilinged room. "Your Honor," Naomi said, her voice cool and conversational. "The petitioner claims my client is paranoid. Paranoid implies a delusion, a belief that people are plotting against you when they are not. But if the plot is real, then it is not paranoia. It is situational awareness. Ms. Klein," the judge, a stern woman named Judge Patterson, said over her glasses, "do you have evidence to refute the medical claims?" "I have better, Your Honor," Naomi said. "I have evidence that the medical claims were manufactured to cover up a felony." Naomi stood up then. She walked to the center of the room. "I would like to call Detective Mason Reeve to the stand." My family didn't move, but the air around them changed. Violet stopped dabbing her eyes. Shane uncrossed his legs. Detective Reeve walked in. He looked tired, but he carried himself with the weight of the law. He took the oath. "Detective," Naomi asked, "on the date of June 14th, did you receive a missing persons call from the Thomas or Rourke family?" "I did not," Reeve said. "Did you receive a call from them at any point during the 9 hours my client was missing on Juniper Ridge Reservoir?" "No, ma'am." "When did you first interact with the family?" "When I called them," Reeve said, "after Ms. Thomas and Mr. Lane had already been rescued by a third party." Naomi turned to the judge. "Your Honor, if a family believes their daughter is having a mental breakdown and vanishes on a boat, they call 911. They do not call an estate lawyer to discuss asset seizure. That is the first fact." "Objection," Violet's lawyer stood up. "Relevance goes to credibility," the judge ruled. "Overruled." Naomi signaled to the clerk. "Please display Exhibit A." The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It was the grainy footage from the fuel dock. Rafe's footage. "This video was taken at 8:15 in the morning," Naomi narrated. "That is Shane Rourke, the petitioner's husband." On screen, Shane was bent over the boat. He was working quickly. The courtroom watched as he removed the oars, wrapped them in a towel, and walked away. They watched him pocket the magnetic key box. "We have a sworn affidavit from the marina manager," Naomi said, holding up Rafe's checklist. "At 6 in the morning, this boat had 2 oars and a spare key. At 9 in the morning, when my client boarded, it had neither. In the interim, the only person to touch that boat was Mr. Rourke." Shane's face turned a violent shade of red. He leaned over and whispered something furious to Violet. She didn't look at him. She was staring at the screen, her face a mask of porcelain stillness. "Now," Naomi said, pacing in front of the witness stand, "let's talk about the suicide note found on the boat." She pulled a plastic evidence bag from her file. Inside was the piece of paper I had found under the rock. You chose this. The family claims my client wrote this, Naomi said, that she left it to taunt them before drifting away, a sign of her instability. Naomi turned to the clerk again. Exhibit B. The screen changed. It was a screenshot of a data log. This is the print spooler history from the HP wireless printer located in the rental house, Naomi said. As you can see, a file named note_V3 was printed at 1:13 in the morning on the day of the incident. This corresponds to the metadata on the laptop registered to Violet Rourke. The courtroom went dead silent, the kind of silence where you can hear the hum of the ventilation system. Your Honor, Naomi said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. My client was asleep in her bed at 1:13 in the morning. Her sister, however, was awake, drafting a note, editing it, version 3. They didn't find this note. Your Honor, they wrote it, they printed it, and they planted it. I looked at my mother. Elaine was trembling. She was gripping her purse so hard her knuckles were white. She looked like she was about to be sick. I would like to ask Mrs. Elaine Thomas a question, Naomi said. Elaine stood up shakily. She walked to the stand. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. Mrs. Thomas, Naomi said gently, you are under oath. Did you know the boat had been tampered with? Elaine stammered. She looked at Gordon. He stared straight ahead. She looked at Violet. Violet was looking at the table. I didn't know the details. Violet handles the details. But you knew Harper wasn't just going for a ride, didn't you? Naomi pressed. You knew she wasn't coming back immediately. We wanted her to be safe, Elaine blurted out, tears spilling over. We just wanted her to sign the papers. Gordon is in so much debt. We were going to lose the house. Violet said she said if Harper was scared enough, she would sign. It was supposed to be a lesson, just a few hours. The admission hung in the air like smoke. It was supposed to be a lesson. So you admit, Naomi said, that this was a coordinated effort to use fear to coerce a signature. We aren't bad people, Elaine sobbed. We are just desperate. Desperation is a motive, Mrs. Thomas, Naomi said, not a defense. Naomi turned back to the judge. And finally, Your Honor, the signature itself. She presented the power of attorney document, the one they had filed with the county. My client is left-handed, Naomi said. She crosses her T from right to left. This document, filed 3 days ago, has a T crossed from left to right. A forensic handwriting analyst has already flagged it as a probable forgery. They filed this document expecting my client to be unavailable long enough for them to liquidate her assets. Judge Patterson looked at the document. Then she looked at the family. Her expression was no longer neutral. It was disgusted. Mr. Rourke, the judge said, looking directly at Shane. Do you have anything to say about the removal of the safety equipment shown in the video? Shane stood up. His lawyer tried to grab his arm, but Shane shook him off. He was boiling over. He was a man who was used to controlling the narrative, used to being the loudest voice in the room, and he was watching his world crumble because of a woman he considered beneath him. It wasn't attempted murder, Shane shouted. His voice boomed off the wood paneling. You people are twisting everything. She is ungrateful. We took care of her. We invited her on vacation, and she treats us like criminals. You removed the oars, Mr. Rourke, the judge said calmly. You cut the engine wires. She needed to understand, Shane roared, pointing a shaking finger at me. She thinks she is so smart with her job and her independence. She needed to know that she is nothing without this family. She deserved a lesson. She deserved to sit out there and rot until she learned some respect. The courtroom gasped. It wasn't a theatrical gasp. It was the sound of air leaving the room. He had said it. She deserved to rot. Shane froze. He realized, a second too late, that he hadn't just justified his actions, he had confessed to malice. He had confessed to the intent to cause suffering. Violet closed her eyes. She knew it was over. Judge Patterson slammed her gavel down. The sound was like a gunshot. That is enough, the judge said. Her voice was ice. The petition for guardianship is dismissed with prejudice, and frankly, counsel. She looked at the family's lawyer. I am appalled that this petition was ever filed. She turned her gaze to Detective Reeve. Detective, given the testimony regarding the forgery, the admission of coercion by Mrs. Thomas, and the outburst by Mr. Rourke regarding his intent to harm, I am referring this entire transcript to the district attorney's office. I am recommending immediate criminal charges for conspiracy, fraud, and reckless endangerment. We will take it from here, Your Honor, Reeves said, standing up and unclipping his handcuffs from his belt. The bailiffs moved in. I didn't watch them get arrested. I didn't want to see my mother crying as she was read her rights. I didn't want to see Shane fighting the cuffs. I didn't want to see Violet's cold, calculating face as she was led away, probably already planning her next move. I stood up and walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was quiet. Sunlight streamed in through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was a different kind of silence than the lake. It was the silence of a storm that had finally broken. Marcus was waiting for me by the doors. He looked tired, but he was smiling. You got them, he said. We got them, I corrected. I leaned against the wall, feeling the cool plaster against my back. I thought about the girl I was 3 days ago, the one who was afraid of upsetting her parents, the one who walked on eggshells. That girl was gone. She had drowned in the lake. The woman standing in the hallway was someone else, someone who knew that the truth wasn't something you waited for. It was something you hunted down, documented, and presented to the world. What now? Marcus asked. I looked at the closed doors of the courtroom. I could hear muffled shouting from inside. Now, I said. We sue them for everything they have. They wanted my land fine. I am going to take their house. I am going to take their trust. I am going to take every single thing they tried to protect. I checked my watch. It was 2:00 in the afternoon. But first, I said, taking Marcus's hand, I need a burger, and I want to buy a new printer, one that only prints the truth. We walked out of the courthouse and into the blinding afternoon sun. I didn't put on my sunglasses. I wanted to see everything clearly. You might think that winning in a courtroom is the end. You might think that once a judge slams a gavel down and calls your family appalling, the war is over. But you would be wrong. The courtroom is just where the official record is kept. The real war happens in the mud, in the dark, and in the whisper networks of the towns where we live. 48 hours after the guardianship petition was thrown out, Violet changed the battlefield. She realized she couldn't win on the law. So she decided to destroy the witness. It started with a notification on my phone at 6 a.m. I was staying at a hotel near Naomi's office, unable to go back to my apartment because it felt too exposed. The notification was from a community Facebook group for Fort Gray. Anonymous member posted, "It is sad what people will do for money these days. A certain local auditor staged a disappearance on a lake just to extort her parents. Imagine faking your own death to blackmail the people who raised you. Mental illness is real. Folks, don't believe the crocodile tears." I stared at the screen. The post had 30 likes, then 40. The comments were rolling in. Is this about the Thomas girl? I heard she has been off the rails since her divorce. Her poor parents. They must be devastated. Violet knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't using her name. She was using the anonymity of the internet to poison the jury pool of public opinion. She wanted to make me toxic. If I was the crazy daughter who staged a kidnapping, then no jury would award me damages. No company would hire me. I would be isolated. Again. Don't reply, Naomi said when I showed her the phone over coffee. Her eyes were scanning the text with the predatory focus of a hawk spotting a field mouse. This is exactly what we want. We want to be slandered, I asked, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. We want them to make a mistake, Naomi said. And anger makes people sloppy. She forwarded the screenshot to her private investigator. Trace the IP. Find out who paid for the VPN they are undoubtedly using to hide their tracks. It took 3 hours. We were sitting in Naomi's conference room, surrounded by takeout containers and evidence files, when the PI called back. It is a burner account, the investigator said on speaker. Created yesterday, but they made a rookie mistake. They paid for the premium boost on the post to make sure more people saw it, and they paid with a credit card. Let me guess, I said. Violet's card? No, the investigator said. It is a secondary card linked to a business account. The cardholder is Gordon Thomas. I felt the air leave my lungs. My father. He wasn't just the passive enabler standing in the background while Violet and Shane did the dirty work. He was funding the smear campaign. He was paying $12.99 to broadcast to my neighbors that I was a liar. That connects him, Naomi said, writing Gordon on the whiteboard and drawing a thick red line to libel. Before this, he was just the beneficiary. Now, he is an active participant in the harassment. We can pierce the corporate veil of his business now. But they weren't done. That afternoon, Marcus got the call. We were in the hotel lobby. Marcus had stepped away to get ice. I saw him answer his phone, saw his shoulders tense up, saw the color drain from his face. He didn't say a word. He just listened for 10 seconds, then hung up. He walked back to me. His hands were shaking. Who was it? I asked. Voice changer, he said. Digital, like in the movies. It said that accidents happen on the road, not just on the water. It said I should check my brake lines before I drive home. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. It was a physical sensation, heavy and hard. They were threatening him. They were threatening the only person who had stood by me. We are getting a protection order, I said. Now, we went back to Naomi. She didn't blink. She drafted the motion for an emergency restraining order in 20 minutes. But while she was typing, she stopped and looked at me. Harper, she said, we need to understand the why. People don't go this far kidnapping, forgery, and now death threats just for an asset, even a valuable one. There is something else. There is a clock ticking for them. The debt, I said. Mom mentioned debt on the phone. I did some digging into your father's financials, Naomi said. She slid a folder across the table. Gordon isn't just in debt. He is underwater. He leveraged the house, his commercial properties, and even his life insurance to back a development deal in Arizona that went bust 2 months ago. And, she paused, and what? And he has been pulling money from client escrow accounts to cover the interest payments. Naomi said, that is embezzlement. That is federal prison time. He has a balloon payment of $300,000 due next Friday. If he misses it, the audit happens, and if the audit happens, he goes away for 20 years. I stared at the numbers. It all made sense. The desperation, the haste, the sloppiness. They didn't just want the $450,000 from my land to get rich. They needed it to plug the hole in the sinking ship before the authorities noticed. They needed my land to save themselves from prison. They were going to sacrifice me to cover his crime, I whispered. Yes, Naomi said, and that makes them cornered animals, which means they are dangerous. Then, my phone rang. It was my mother, again. Don't answer, Marcus said. No, I said. I want to hear it. I put it on speaker. Harper. Elaine's voice was a whisper. Are you alone? I am with my lawyer. Mom, you know that. Please, she wept. You have to stop the lawsuit. You have to stop the investigation. Dad is talking about doing something stupid. He has a gun in the safe. Harper, he is saying it is over. Then call the police, I said. That is not my responsibility. We can make a deal, Elaine said. Her voice shifted, losing the hysterical edge and becoming something sharper, colder. I have the emails. I have the emails between Violet and Shane where they planned the boat trip. I have the receipts for the supplies. I can give them to you. I frowned. Why would you give me evidence against your own daughter? Because I didn't cut the wires, Elaine said. I didn't know they were going to leave you there without water. I thought they were just going to scare you. I am a victim too. Harper, I was manipulated by them. You want immunity, Naomi cut in. You are offering to turn state's evidence against your husband and children in exchange for us dropping the civil suit against you personally. I am an old woman, Elaine said. I can't go to prison. I can't be homeless. Harper, you are my daughter. You wouldn't let your mother rot in a cell, would you? Not when I am offering you the truth. I closed my eyes. I remembered being 6 years old, scraping my knee, and my mother putting a bandage on it. I remembered her teaching me to bake. I remembered the way she used to look at me before I became difficult. But then I remembered the sun. I remembered the thirst. I remembered the feeling of the rope cutting into my waist while I dragged a boat across a silent lake. And I remembered that while I was screaming for help, she was sitting in a hotel room, waiting for me to break. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling to trade Violet's life for her own comfort. She was cannibalizing the family to survive. You chose this, I said. There was silence on the line. What, she whispered. That is what the note said. Mom, you chose this. You chose to side with them. You chose to stay silent when I was missing. And now, you are choosing to sell out Violet to save your own skin. Harper, please. No deal, I said. You don't get to negotiate with the victim. You can tell your story to the district attorney. Maybe he will be more sentimental than I am. I hung up. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and fast. It was the last tear I would shed for her. That was brave, Naomi said softly. That was necessary, I replied. An hour later, Detective Reeve called. He had news. We found an employment record, Reeve said. We ran a background check on Shane Rourke that went deeper than just criminal history. We looked at tax records. And, Naomi asked. 10 years ago, Reeve said. During college, Shane worked for 3 summers at a marina in Lake Havasu. His job title was junior mechanic. He didn't just know how to drive a boat. He was certified to repair 2-stroke outboards. He knows exactly how to bypass a kill switch and how to disconnect a fuel line without damaging the threads. That proves technical knowledge, Naomi said. That removes the accidental damage defense entirely. He knew exactly what he was doing. We are issuing arrest warrants, Reeve said. For Shane Rourke and Violet Thomas, for conspiracy to commit kidnapping and reckless endangerment. We are still building the case on your parents. But it is coming. Do it, I said. One more thing, Reeve added. We found the original of the power of attorney document in their hotel room safe. They were keeping it. We have handwriting analysis confirming it is a trace forgery. Your sister Violet practiced your signature on a notepad found in the same safe. They kept the receipts, Marcus said, shaking his head. Arrogance. Now, Naomi said, standing up. We go on the offensive, civilly. She drafted a new motion. Motion for prejudgment attachment of assets. We are going to freeze everything, Naomi explained. We are suing them for intentional infliction of emotional distress, assault, battery, and civil conspiracy. We are asking for $5 million in damages, and to ensure they can pay. We are asking the court to freeze the sale of their house, their bank accounts, and yes, your father's commercial properties. This will trigger the audit, I said. If you freeze his accounts, he can't move the money back. The bank will see the hole. Exactly, Naomi said. We are going to blow the whistle on his embezzlement by default. We filed the motion electronically at 4:55 in the afternoon. At 5:30, Violet's lawyer called. He sounded breathless. He sounded like a man trying to stop a train with his hands. Ms. Klein, he said. Can we talk? My clients are distressed. They are willing to discuss a settlement. They are willing to drop the guardianship claim permanently. They are willing to sign a non-disparagement agreement. They just want the asset freeze lifted, immediately. I bet they do, Naomi said, leaning back in her chair. Look, the lawyer said, this is a family tragedy. Nobody wants to see parents in jail. Nobody wants to see a long drawn-out public trial. Let's go to mediation. Let's sit down and work out a number. Naomi looked at me. She raised an eyebrow. Do you want to settle? I thought about the anonymous post. I thought about the threat to Marcus's brakes. I thought about my father funding my destruction with stolen money. I shook my head. Naomi smiled. She spoke into the phone with a voice that cut like a diamond. "Counsel," she said, "mediation is for misunderstandings. This was an assassination attempt. You want to settle? Here is our settlement offer: full confession, public retraction of all lies, surrender of all claims to Harper's land, and they turn themselves in to Detective Reeve by sunset." "That is impossible," the lawyer sputtered. "You are asking for their heads." "They tried to take my client's life," Naomi said. "I am just taking their lifestyle." She paused, and then she delivered the line that I would remember for the rest of my life. "Tell Violet that mediation only means something when the truth is on the table. And right now, the only thing on the table is a pair of handcuffs. We will see you in court." She hung up. The room was quiet. The sun was setting outside, painting the Denver skyline in hues of orange and purple. "They are going to run," Marcus said suddenly. "If they know warrants are coming, and they know the money is frozen, they are going to run." "Let them try," I said. "They are broke. They are watched, and for the first time in their lives. They are the ones who are stranded." I picked up my phone. I opened the community Facebook page where the anonymous post was still gathering comments. I didn't reply to the comments. I wrote my own post. "My name is Harper Thomas. I am the woman on the lake, and I am not a ghost. I am the witness. Tomorrow. The police report regarding the sabotage of my boat and the forgery of my signature will be public record. Until then, ask yourselves, why would a family pay to boost a post about their loved one unless they were selling a lie?" The truth is coming. I hit post. I watched the likes roll in. 1, 10, 100. The tide was turning, and this time, I wasn't the one drowning. The final day in court did not feel like a battle. It felt like an autopsy. We were dissecting the corpse of a family to find the cause of death. And the cause was greed. The courtroom was packed. The story had leaked, my post had gone viral. And the local press was hungry for the details of the lake abandonment case. Violet, Shane, Gordon, and Elaine sat at the defense table. They looked exhausted. The arrogance that had defined them at the dinner table was gone, replaced by the twitchy, desperate energy of trapped animals. This hearing was a hybrid proceeding. The district attorney had filed criminal charges, and Naomi had attached our massive civil suit for damages to the same factual findings. It was a two-front war, and my family was losing on both sides. Naomi stood up. She looked impeccable in a sharp black suit. She didn't pace. She didn't shout. She just walked to the podium and laid down a stack of papers that looked heavy enough to crush a skull. "Your Honor," Naomi began, "we are here to determine liability, but liability implies an accident. What happened to Harper Thomas was not an accident. It was a calculated architectural dismantling of her safety." She signaled to the tech booth. "Exhibit C, the forensic handwriting analysis." The screen illuminated. 2 signatures appeared side by side. One was from a birthday card I had sent my mother years ago. The other was from the power of attorney document filed by my father. "The top signature is genuine," Naomi explained. "Notice the cross of the letter T. It goes from right to left. Harper is left-handed. The bottom signature, on the legal document, crosses left to right. That is a right-handed stroke. But we didn't just rely on the ink. We found the practice sheets." The screen changed. It showed a page from a notepad found in the hotel safe. It was covered in attempts to write my name. Harper Thomas, Harper Thomas, Harper T. Violet Rourke sat in a hotel room and practiced becoming her sister. Naomi said, "This is not guardianship. This is identity theft." Violet stared at the table. Her hands were clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. "And regarding the timeline," Naomi continued, "the defense argues that the suicide note was a result of Harper's mental state on the boat. They claim she wrote it there." Naomi pointed to the screen again. "This is a forensic image of Violet Rourke's laptop hard drive. The file note_V3 was created on June 12th, 2 days before the trip. It was last edited at 1:13 in the morning on the night before the incident. They wrote the script before the play even started." The courtroom murmured. The premeditation was undeniable. "But the smoking gun," Naomi said, "is not paper, it is video." She nodded to the bailiff. "Play the enhanced footage from the fuel dock." We had sent Rafe's grainy video to a digital forensic lab. The result was clear. The blurry figure of Shane was now sharp. We watched him step into the boat. We watched him bend down. Naomi paused the video. "Zoom in on Sector 4, she commanded. The image expanded. Shane's hand was visible near the motor. He wasn't just checking the oil. He was holding a pair of wire cutters. The silver blades glinted in the morning sun. "He cuts the kill switch wire," Naomi narrated calmly. "Then he reaches under the stern seat. He removes the magnetic key box. Then he walks to the bow and loosens the knot on the anchor rope. He doesn't untie it. He loosens it, so it will hold for a few minutes, maybe an hour, and then slip free with the motion of the waves." Shane looked up at the screen. His face was gray. There was no defense against high-definition reality. "I would like to call Elaine Thomas to the stand," Naomi said. My mother rose. She looked older than she had a week ago. She walked to the witness box as if she were walking to the gallows. "Mrs. Thomas," Naomi said, "you heard the recording of your phone call with me. You admitted that you wanted Harper to yield. Tell the court exactly what the plan was." "We didn't mean to kill her," Elaine whispered. Her voice was trembling. "We really didn't. Violet said we would just let them drift for 3 or 4 hours. Just enough to make them scared. Just enough to make them realize how helpless they were without us. We were going to go back out at sunset and tow them in. We were going to be the heroes." "You were going to rescue us from a danger you created," I said from the plaintiff's table. "I couldn't help it." "And then what happened?" Naomi asked. "The wind," Elaine sobbed. "The wind changed. It started blowing south. They drifted faster than we thought. By noon, we couldn't see the boat anymore. Violet said we shouldn't call the police because they would see the missing oars. She said we had to wait. She said Harper would eventually break and sign the papers when we found her." "So you left them," Judge Patterson said. Her voice was low and dangerous. "You left your daughter and her fiancé in the middle of a reservoir, without water, exposed to the elements, because you were afraid of getting caught." "We were scared," Elaine cried. "Violet Rourke," the judge barked. "Stand up." Violet stood. She didn't look scared. She looked annoyed. She looked like a woman who was tired of explaining simple concepts to stupid people. "Did you orchestrate this?" the judge asked. "I tried to help her," Violet said. Her voice was steady, terrifyingly calm. "Harper is ungrateful. She has this asset, this land, and she refuses to help the family. My father was drowning in debt. We were going to lose everything, and she just sat there with her moral superiority. She needed a lesson. She needed to understand that choices have consequences." "A lesson," the judge repeated. "Yes," Violet said. "A reality check." "Ms. Rourke," the judge said, leaning over the bench. "A lesson is cutting off a credit card. A lesson is not stripping the survival gear from a marine vessel. A lesson is not depriving human beings of water. That is not a reality check. That is torture." "It was just a few hours," Violet scoffed. "If she hadn't panicked and towed the boat, she would have been fine." "If she hadn't towed the boat," the judge said, "she would be dead, and you would be facing a murder charge instead of attempted manslaughter." Violet rolled her eyes. It was a small gesture, but it sealed her fate. "Your Honor," Naomi said, "before you pass judgment, there is one final matter regarding the civil dispute. The defense has argued that their actions were motivated by a desire to secure the mineral rights for the family trust. They are asking for a settlement that includes a percentage of those rights." Naomi turned to me. I stood up. "There are no rights to settle," I said. Violet whipped her head around. "What?" "The mineral rights," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "The land, the deal with the broker, it is gone." "You can't sell it," Violet shrieked. "We have an injunction." "I didn't sell it," I said. "I donated it." The room went silent. 2 days ago," I continued, my voice ringing clear in the silence. Right after I hired Naomi, I signed a deed of transfer. I placed the entire property into an irrevocable charitable trust dedicated to conservation and the support of victims of financial abuse. The land can never be sold. The mineral rights can never be mined. It is a nature preserve now. It belongs to the birds and the coyotes. It will never belong to you. Violet's face crumbled. The mask fell away, revealing the raw, ugly greed underneath. "You stupid!" she screamed. She lunged toward me. The bailiffs were on her in a second. They slammed her against the table. "You burned it," she screamed, thrashing in the handcuffs. "You burned the money. You ruined us." "I didn't burn it," I said calmly. "I buried it, where you can't hurt anyone with it ever again." The judge banged her gavel. Order in this court." When the noise died down, the judge looked at the defendants with pure contempt. "I have heard enough," she said. The sentences came down like a hammer. Violet Rourke and Shane Rourke were sentenced to 10 years in state prison for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, reckless endangerment, and fraud. They were denied bail pending appeal. Gordon Thomas was charged with funding the defamation campaign and forgery because of his age and health. He received 5 years of house arrest and a massive restitution order that would strip him of his remaining commercial properties. He would die penniless, watching his empire be auctioned off to pay for his crimes. Elaine Thomas received 5 years of probation and a permanent restraining order. She was forbidden from contacting me ever again. She would spend her twilight years alone, exactly the fate she had tried to threaten me with. The civil judgment was brutal. The court awarded me $3 million in punitive damages, to be paid from the liquidation of my father's assets and Shane's savings. I didn't smile when the verdict was read. I didn't cheer. I just felt a heavy weight lift off my chest, a weight I hadn't realized I had been carrying for 38 years. 2 months later, the air was crisp. The leaves on the aspens were turning gold. I stood on the shore of Juniper Ridge Reservoir. The water was blue and calm, indifferent to the drama that had played out on its surface. I wasn't afraid of it anymore. "You okay?" I turned. Marcus was standing by the truck. He looked healthy. The sunburn had faded into a tan. He was holding 2 coffees. "I am," I said. I took the cup. "I just wanted to see it one last time." We had used the settlement money to buy a house in a different state, far away from the mountains of Colorado, a place near the ocean, where the water moved and didn't sit still. I had started the foundation I promised a legal fund to help people trapped in abusive guardianships and financial coercion. I looked at the rock where I had found the note. It was still there. "You chose this." I walked over to it. I picked up a smaller stone. I knelt down and scratched a new message into the surface of the big rock. It wasn't for them. It was for me. I survived this. I stood up and took Marcus's hand. "Ready to go?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go home." My family thought they could leave us in the middle of the lake. They thought that silence and distance would erase us. They thought that if they took away the keys and the oars, we would just drift away into nothingness. They were wrong. They thought we would never come back, but the survivor always brings the truth, and the truth is the only thing that floats. Thank you so much for listening to Harper's story. It is a reminder that sometimes the people who share your DNA are the ones you need to protect yourself from the most. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you watching from a coffee shop in Seattle, a bedroom in London, or maybe on a break at work in Sydney? Comment hi and your location below. I love reading where our community is growing. If this story hooked you, please make sure to subscribe to Leona Revenge Stories. Hit that like button to support the channel, and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who might need to hear it. Stay safe, and remember, always check your safety gear.